everybody. This is Kason over at SOLIDS 3D Printing, and this is episode 2 of a new podcast series where we're just trying to highlight local businesses that we've gotten the pleasure to work with. And today we have Arthur Erickson, who I've been friends with for quite some time, 4, 5, 6 years, maybe even
5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can think back to our old shop when we first met.
That's right.
The storage unit. So I know we've changed a lot, and I know you've changed a lot as well. So I will hand it over to you and see if you can introduce yourself a little bit more and your business.
Sure. My name is Arthur Erickson. Thanks for having me. Like you said, we've been working with you, and I've known you for about, I'd say in 2018, we started using your 3D printed parts on some of our drones. So I guess I should say my company, Hylio, produces drones for the agricultural industry. So we make big drones in the 400 to 500 pound range, and they deliver liquid or solid payloads. Crop inputs is what we call them. So that could be fertilizers, pesticides, cover crop seeds, granular products for fighting insects and stuff like that. So these drones are an automated tool for doing that, cheaper, faster, and safer than traditional methods. So that's what we do. I kind of jumped ahead, but a big part of our manufacturing process, of course, does involve what your company does, which is creating 3D printed components in various materials that are mostly used for like structural joints and mounting of sensors, but they're critical to what we do.
Awesome. Well, I know we got a lot of history, and I'm tempted to jump into a lot of stuff, but I'm going to take a step back here, and I'm curious, to share some of your personal journey. So, where are you from? How'd you end up in the, I guess, southeast or southwest Houston area, and just a little bit of, I guess, your personal background?
Yeah. I'm from here. So I was actually born in Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston. So Houston, born and raised. My dad is from New Jersey. My mom's actually an immigrant from Malaysia. She moved to Canada and then went to Houston for her master's. And then my dad was going to University of Houston for his MBA as well. And that's where they met. Popped me out. I have a brother, I have a sister. We all grew up here. And I just frankly love it. Really never left. So I went to college at UT Austin. So I was in Austin for 4.5 years. Mm-hmm. Good education, but I'm not a huge fan of the Austin scene. I'm not weird enough. So I came back to Houston basically as fast as I could, and yes, been here working ever since.
And what was your degree in?
Aerospace engineering.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so what did you do directly out of college?
Just this. So I started Hylio in college.
Okay.
Back in 2015, which was just my second year of college. And I immediately fell in love with entrepreneurship and really pursued it to the detriment of my studies. So I became a horrible student. All I cared about, I was really arrogant, still am probably. I just wanted to do the whole startup dropout thing.
Yeah.
It's not like I wanted to do that, but it was kind of leading towards that. I can understand why that happens because I just thought I had such a good idea. And in hindsight, my idea was okay, but really, really rough around the edges. Yeah. But I thought it was I had the Midas touch. So I was I'm just going to focus on this, forget the degree. The degree is just, I was cut out the middleman. I don't need the piece of paper. But I ended up just coming to my senses. I talked to my parents about it, my girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And they were just you really should finish your degree, just get it just in case. So I finished up. But yeah, I was already doing the company, like I said, during my sophomore year. And then by the time I left college, we had our first big commercial project. So I just jumped right into that. And then that rolled into everything we're doing today.
Yeah. So when you decided to go for an aerospace engineering major, was that something you'd always kind of known, or is it something you kind of figured out once you got to college?
The latter. So I was interested in STEM. Actually, I first just did, I was doing biology. Interestingly enough, and maybe I was going to go pre-med. I didn't really have a good idea formulated yet, and then I just fell into engineering because I liked the challenge. I remember talking to my counselor, looking at the curriculum and whatnot, and what an engineer does, because you have an idea of it when you're in high school. You kind of know what an engineer is, but you don't really know what they're studying or applying. So I talked to my counselor about it, and honestly, growing up, I wasn't great at mathematics. Pretty good at just science in general, but not super strong with math. And I liked the idea that there was a good amount of math in engineering because I was okay, I'm going to get better at it. So I just like to challenge myself like that. So I was okay, this should be fun. I tried to get into mechanical engineering, which is what you do, I think, or what you did.
Yep.
It was way too crowded, and I didn't have good enough grades, so they just they stuck me in aerospace, which was like mechanical, but with a few extra like fluid classes.
Yeah.
So like all the people that wanted to be mechies that couldn't get in, just they throw them over there, which is kind of funny because nowadays aerospace is like really sought after with
Yeah,
the private
sure.
space industry and all that. But back when I went to school about 10 years ago, it was like the backwater major.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was kind of the opposite experience. I went as a mechanical engineer, and I actually wanted to be computer science and go in, and then I realized everybody kept asking me to take viruses off their computer and fix it. I was like, I don't want to be an IT guy all years, my whole life. So I went into mechanical, and yeah, there's this kind of weird criteria, and I was in the Corps of Cadets at the time. Long story short, I almost kind of had to force to switch majors, and aerospace was my backup plan. So it seems like we kind of did a little bit of an opposite journey there. So
Yeah.
cool. So you said you started your sophomore year working on the company. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, because I went into school 2012. Yeah, so I mean, it would have been like halfway through my sophomore year.
Okay.
That's right.
So it wasn't like a senior design project or anything. Like this is all completely separate from schooling.
Yeah. So in my curriculum, so in aerospace engineering at UT, the higher level classes, you start to work with drone technology a bit because it's a good vehicle for just learning about like mechatronics and flight dynamics and stuff like that, controls.
Sure.
So we started working a lot with that. And my buddies and now co-founders at the time were also into drones, just like from a hobby perspective. So we would just like tinker with stuff and go on the forums, right? Like there's a very active open source drone community online. So we were playing with that stuff really just for fun, recreationally, and it was somewhat supplemented by the coursework. But yeah, it wasn't a school project at all. It was just a pure entrepreneurial spirit that it incited me and my co-founders to start the company.
So what's interesting is I'm thinking about the timing you're mentioning there, around 2012-ish.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, I should say like 2014.
2014.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I went into school in 2012, but it wasn't until about 2014 that we started the idea of the company.
Okay. So I'm thinking about in the 3D printing industry, and around that same time period is when a lot of patents started to expire, and I call it the MakerBot era, where 3D printers are opening up to the open source community, and people are realizing, one, we have the computational power that we did not have 10 years prior. Patents are expiring, and this technology can easily be scaled down. Do you see some similarities there in the drone industry?
Absolutely. I have a question. Like, who had the patents before?
There's
like the Great Awakening moment.
Two major companies that dominated both major technology. Well, I guess three or four, but there's 3D Systems and there's Stratasys. Those two companies kind of dominated most of the patents for, I would say, the first 20, 30 years of 3D printing.
So did HP come in like after the fact, for example, and just start like, scooping up IP or buying out some of the smaller players?
So HP with our multi-jet fusion technology, they came in and introduced, I think around 2016. But from what I've heard, they've been developing it for a little bit longer. Like obviously there's several years, if not even a decade or so of development prior to that.
So in the drone industry, similar parallels, because basically the story is drones arose, let's say 15 years ago or so, maybe 10 years ago, because of the consumer electronics industry. All of that infrastructure, which is mostly, of course, like in China, just the ability to have like tiny GPS units, tiny processors, and all that just directly translated to drones, little consumer drones. They have drones like the early DJI Phantom for Phantom 1 was just, a cell phone GPS unit, like a cell phone processor with some propellers on it.
Right.
So yeah, that's a similar thing. Like around that time, you just had that shift economically, which made them a lot more accessible from a price perspective to the white market. Because drones before then were just military, right? Mostly just large military units costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and just Pentagon was using them for reconnaissance and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's I guess a good segue to one of the questions I definitely wanted to talk about is like how and why agriculture? So do you have an agriculture background?
No.
Okay. So what's the story there?
So as we talked about, I grew up here. So of course I grew up with a lot of farmer rancher friends and like hunting and Boy Scouts and all that. So I was no stranger to the outdoors. Certainly I'm not a farmer. My dad sells insurance. My mom is an accountant. So pretty boring jobs, no offense to them. But it happened organically. So I should say my co-founder, a guy named Mike Oda, we actually work on his family ranch. So he's
Okay.
in ag. He himself, he's like a jack of all trades. He has a lot of businesses. He's a rancher. That's like one of his 5 things that he does. But anyway, we first did a variety of projects. So when I was coming out of school, it wasn't ag wasn't like the one thing we did. We did parcel delivery. We did some media related stuff, like some research stuff. So we had sold like a few drones to companies that were doing research for like obstacle avoidance and stuff like that. But ag was a really good fit for us, and it happened organically because I remember we were actually working on a parcel delivery project in Costa Rica at the time. So there's like a little bit of our company history where we were operating south of the border, but we were doing parcel delivery, not making very much money. It was tough work. There's a lot of complications with flying over cities. But we were just driving through the countryside of Costa Rica one day, and we just saw how challenging it was to apply chemicals and stuff in the terrain with by hand. In Costa Rica, it doesn't have like all the fancy John Deere machines that we have up here in the States typically. So it just kind of clicked for us. We said, hey, like I think our drone technology actually could be a really good fit for that use case. Like we saw the value proposition really strongly, visceral, just like seeing these people out there like spreading chemical by hand. It was like there's got to be a better way to do this, right?
Yeah.
So that's when we actually shifted into agriculture and started exploring those projects. So we had from the start already considered that to be one of the viable markets, but we were taking like a throw darts at the board approach and just seeing like what stuck the best. And so pretty early there, like by 2017, we fully shifted to agriculture, and that was just because we literally with our eyes recognize like how much of a step change it could be introducing drone technology.
So at that time, did you see any other competitors in that specific kind of vertical market?
Not Americans, like not really. DJI, big manufacturer of drones, they make 80% of the drones in the world right now. They already had a few spray drone units in the market, mostly in Asia though. They hadn't really made it over to the States yet. So that was like light competition at the time. It's very strong competition now, I'll say.
Yeah.
But there weren't really any players here in the States back in the 2016, 2017.
Okay. So after you graduated, you came back here and you went full time into it, right?
That's right.
What was the initial first, I guess, challenge? Like when you started working on this, was it hardware? Was it software? Like, what was the first major challenge that you faced when you started developing it?
Well, both hardware and software were very challenging. This is where we could talk about your business a little bit. Rapid prototyping, as you know, that's why you do what you do, is a very sought after thing, concept, because it can get really expensive. Prototyping drones is not like prototyping other things, because if you mess up on a drone prototype, it crashes and you basically lose everything.
Yeah.
Like it's a very destructive mistake.
Right.
So yeah, that can't stop you though from iterating and moving fast and breaking things. Like Zuckerberg would say, you still have to put yourself out there and just try. And what facilitates that is just being able to rapidly produce hardware. So at the very beginning, I remember using a lot of ET's machine shop resources, and they had 3D printers and laser cutters and CNCs. And so I had a bit of a like self-taught crash course in just how to do that, centered around making some of our first MVPs, minimum viable product prototypes. So I was, when we first started the company, like the head mechy like hardware design guy, even though I'm like not even great at that, but it was a company of like 3 people at the time.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. Our co-founder, Nikhil, who's now our CTO, was doing the software stuff. So he can speak to like the software stuff. I won't really get into that, but he's a brilliant programmer. So he did the work of like 10 men, I think, just like in 6 months, getting our MVP software platform up and running. But in that time as well, so like 2015, 2016, when I was still in school, using the school's resources, I was I was learning the hard way about like fastest, cheapest, sleekest ways to do like 3D printed components that maximize strength, but also didn't take forever to print, like didn't need exotic materials and stuff like that. So it was really challenging to just find out the fastest and the best way to make prototypes and make hardware that you can just deploy in a matter of days versus months, right? So you have to just move fast in that early company phase where you're
Just a lot of trial and error.
creating like a lot of new product features and changes and stuff like that. So we needed a way to just be faster.
Right.
That it took time. You can only learn that through experience. You can't like read a textbook. There's no cookbook for that. There's no blueprint for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with the sentiment because a lot of people, think about, well, 3D printing, it seems easy enough. I'm like, well, there's complications that come into play when you go at scale, and there's not a playbook for this, or for what you're doing. You're kind of a little bit of a pioneer on that topic. Are there any similar industries that you like? I guess one more specific question would be, these are big drones, like bigger than I've met. I remember the first time you brought one here, you set it up.
Surprising, right?
It was surprising. I was expecting it to be, large, but not like it's an aircraft.
Sure, yeah.
So were there any other parallels to other large, I would say consumer commercial grade drones like that where you can at least take some information from?
Not really. You nailed it. I mean, it was pioneering, not to sound like we're so special or anything, but
Right.
I really wished at the time there was something that we could follow, but there really wasn't. So,
Right.
like I said, we learned the hard way because you would design it like a shoulder joint for the drone, and you'd be like, okay, this seems strong enough. You'd hold it in your hand and just like kind of like bend it around, like, oh, yeah, this will hold. And then you put it on the drone. Once the drone spools its rotors up, just so much force, like there's a high impulse, right? It would just crack the thing, just crash the whole drone. So there was no like guidelines. There's no designs online for drones above like 20 pounds or so. So it was a lot of just trial and error and just like old school, test bench stuff where like you're printing a joint, you're putting in a device and just like hanging weights off of it and seeing how much you can hold. It was a lot of that.
So how did you make your first sale? Like, who's your first customer? Is that something you can share?
Yeah, I actually do remember. So there's two conversations. We actually started making money as a service provider first. So we were using our own drones that we made, our prototypes. We were spraying people's farms. We got paid like not a lot, maybe like $5 or $6 per acre that we sprayed. It was enough to keep the lights on, right? And I don't really remember. I'm trying to remember the first farm that we actually sprayed for money down, and this was down in Central America. I think there was a plantation called Casa, Cassa, in El Salvador. I think that might have been our first paid spray job customer. But besides that, so actually like selling the drones, which is what we do primarily as a business, the first customer we had was a farmer named Bert Watts. And he was in his 80s, I think, when we sold him his first drone. So we were at a trade show in Indiana with a company we work with called X Hybrids. So they're a big family-owned corn and soybean seed company.
Okay.
They're out of Atlanta, Indiana is the town. And they put on a show every year. They had met us previously at a drone convention in Colorado. So they invited us to their show because they said, hey, if you're showcasing a spray drone, that might be useful for our farmers to see at our trade show. So they put on this big show once a year. We show up, and then Bert Watts, who I mentioned, comes up, and he's just like, what's that? Asking like real straightforward, like earnest questions, right? He's a straight shooter. So he's like, what is that? Right? So spray drone. He's like, what can it do? And we're like, well, it can precisely apply fungicide or herbicide, whatever you need to increase your yields. And he's like, how does it work? So we explain the software and all that. So after like 4 or 5 minutes of questioning, he says, how much? And then I think at the time we were charging 25,000 for like the total kit, the total package. So we said 25,000. And he said, okay, hold on, like let me get my checkbook. Then he pulls the checkbook out, writes us a check, gives it to us right there.
Yeah.
And we were stunned because like we obviously weren't even expecting to sell a drone.
Yeah.
We hadn't sold a single drone up to that point. And we didn't even have like a true commercial plan. Like we kind of just threw 25,000 out there. It's just like a rough idea, right?
Yeah.
But he signed the check right there, and then we shipped him a drone 2 or 3 weeks later. So that was the very first customer, and we kept it kind of limited. So, like I said, that was kind of a surprise. So we sold it to him, sold it to like a handful of other customers through like that X Hybrids network of customers that they had, and we kind of monitored the reception. We tried to get through like the initial bugs and like minor things like that. And then we more broadly expanded, like going into 2020. So we sold that to Bert in 2019. And then by 2020, like Q1, we were selling them on the wide market, right, as like an official launch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a time frame in the business's history where you thought like this was a pivotal thing that kind of, I would say, escalated growth, or has it kind of been more linear, organic?
I'm trying to think. That's a good question. It's kind of been go from the beginning. Um, there was a moment, so we launched a product uh, called the AG272. This was just beginning of 2023. So we started selling it late 2022. But this product is the biggest spray drone on the market that's commercially available. So it carries 18 gallons, which is about 200 pounds, give or take, with the payload based on the density of the payload. But it's a big unit. Like you said, I mean, it's an aircraft. It's almost the size of like a small sedan. So this drone, especially at the time, so like a year and a half ago, early 2023, was unheard of. Like this capacity, the amount of productivity it could, like the amount of acres it could spray, I should say. So it could do about 50, 60 acres per hour. Um, Still, that's like industry leading in terms of productivity. So at the time, it was a really big splash in the market. And I remember launching it late 2022, and just orders came like flooding in, like way too many orders for us to handle, right? Because we're like a growing company. So, and by that I mean like we can't instantly fulfill them. So we build them as fast as we can, but we got like dozens of people like first few weeks ordering these units, and so we just said, hey, like we got to hire more people, we got to get more space in here, more machines for production. And since then, it's just kind of been like boom, 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 like orders coming in. We've since launched new products as well, additional products that are big hits in the market. So we've been really busy. It's a good problem, as they say. Production scaling, as you know, is difficult. There's stuff that you can't predict that just happens, just blows up in your face when you're on the journey. So we've been working through that and just like really focusing on trying to do it responsibly, maintaining the quality, but increasing our production rate to meet the market demand.
So when I'm really tempted to go into like technical stuff. I'm super fascinated. I even think about, you have big fluid payloads. Does the fluid, as it's moving around in the tanks, does that cause control issues?
Yes.
So I'm really tempted to go down that. I think maybe that might be a whole nother topic that we can maybe do maybe later on. But so I want to focus a little bit more on the business itself. And so you have multiple product lines now, right?
That's right.
How is dealing with customer service with such a high tech piece of machinery?
Well, a lot of the secret is it's like the Wizard of Oz, where like you don't want them to know what's going on behind the curtain that makes everything work. Because it's kind of like the Apple philosophy, where it's like you just want to sell them a product, it just works for them, like super super simple interface. So a lot of the ways that we've structured our product, our technology, and our support process flows is to again shield the customer. Not that we're hiding information from them, but like shield them, because like that's just like an icky situation for them if they have to like open up the cover and like dig around wires and stuff like that. So
Yeah, for sure.
we've really tried to design the product to be really robust and serviceable remotely by us, not the customer themselves, right? As much as possible. So we have automated tools for, like, I'll give you an example. Like a customer might be flying and he'll land the drone and it'll give them like an arming warning before he can take off for the next flight. It'll be like GPS one, like not responding, and it's like, contact support. And so what happens is they'll call us. We'll tell them, hey, sir, please upload logs. So there's like an automatic like log that you just click download, send it to our servers. We have algorithms essentially that parse through the logs just to find like common issues.
Mm-hmm.
Our techs immediately see, okay, GPS one failed. Why did it fail? Oh, it's like some of the data isn't going through. Might be like a loose connection. So then in that case, we just immediately know, hey, sir, like there's a connection issue with your GPS. We're going to send you a new cable right now. Send him a cable. He's back up and flying the next day, right? And so we try to just really minimize what the customer needs to know and just give them like action items like that, where it's just like replace cable A. We're not going to like say, open up the top and like, can you like probe this with the multimeter and this and that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's like that's what support generally looks for us. It's just really trying to streamline it and have our techs do all like the hard diagnostic work.
So I would imagine like this is not like going to Best Buy and buying a drone. Like this, you're getting the key, you're handing the keys over to an aircraft
Yeah.
when somebody buys one of these things. So what's the typical like training or onboarding for a new customer?
It's a little more involved than just like a little camera drone. That's right. There are some licenses in the U.S. that govern and regulate how and who can use these things.
Mhm.
So it's not our requirement as a company to make sure that you're fully licensed, but we do need to notify you that these regulations exist. So we tell you as a customer, hey, there's this FAA Part 107, FAA Part 137. I won't get into them because it's too technical, but there's these licenses you have to get, and we explain basically how to get them. So we say it's kind of like TurboTax, where we have these PDFs. And we say, here's like a template. You would fill your name in here, here, and here, like put your company address here, define your procedures here in this section. We say, it's up to you now. Like we led the horse to water, like you have to drink.
Right.
And we can't actually apply, like legally, we can't apply for these licenses for them. They have to do it themselves. So that's part of like the onboarding process. And then on the other hand, there's like actually the technical training. So we used to actually train everyone individually. They would either come down to our facility here in the Houston area, or we would be like on a Zoom call with them. But we're at the scale where we can't do that. So instead, what we've done is we've created a bunch of videos. So like YouTube videos that are divided into little like digestible chunks. But there's a big manual which kind of serves as like a curriculum that the operator goes through themselves, and then there's little video modules attached to that curriculum that they would watch in sequence. And so customer buys a drone, he gets all this information. He can call us, right? If he needs any clarification, he can call our support line and we'll walk him through like a certain thing he doesn't understand. But there's about like 5 to 6 hours worth of like core material that they go over on their own, self-study, and then they feel pretty comfortable flying the drone. And then after that, everything is learning with on the job, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you're going to get all the basics within a day doing that virtual self-study, like I said. And then there's just stuff that you're going to learn just the second you fly for the first time and land it or crash it, you're going to learn a lot. So
I can imagine
it comes at you fast.
the first time taking off, like a little bit of anxiety, I would imagine.
Such a big machine, yes.
So what are your types of clients? Are they normally like do they have one drone, or do you have clients that have fleets of these things?
It's for the most part, people still just buying one drone right now. Just the market's relatively new, so you don't see. We're still in the early adopter phase. You don't have people just going all in, like I want 30 drones.
Yeah.
But some of the more technically minded people are buying fleets of 3, 4, 5, 6 drones. So I'd say a quarter of the customers are buying multiple drones. Everyone else right now is just starting off with one.
Now can they work in tandem?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm glad you brought it up because it's like kind of like it's news. This year in February, my company Hylio, we got the first approval in the U.S. to swarm fly these agricultural drones. So by swarm, simply put, we mean one operator and up to 3 drones. So it's kind of silly. It used to be the FAA regulation said that for each drone in operation, you need 2 operators, 2 humans. It would be a pilot and what they call a visual observer for each drone operating. So for 3 drones, you would need 6 people. Doesn't make any sense, right? The whole point of a drone is to extend the abilities of a single human operator because they're autonomous machines.
Right.
Yes. So now, finally, as of February of this year, we became the first company to get permission to do that, which just applied to us temporarily for like a month or 2. But now it's been generalized and people cited its precedent setting. So our customers can now use that permission we got to also apply to their businesses. So now legally our customers can swarm fly one operator, 3 drones. It's a huge game changer. I mean, it really is. It's simple math. It's one drone used to do 50 acres per hour. 3 can do 150. Right, it's not perfectly linear. Like there's some losses because like you got to manage 3 drones now, but it's like 3 drones can do 140 acres per hour, right? Something to that effect.
That's amazing. So you mentioned some numbers there. The coverage, like how long what's the payload for your largest drone?
18 gallons about. So
18
about 200 pounds worth of payload, give or take.
Okay. And how long would it take to deploy that?
It's actually really fast. Typically only like 7 or 8 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah, to paint the picture, you get the drone out there, you fill it up. So you got like a pump running to a big nurse tank full of a chemical water mixture. Fill the drone up, click takeoff. It flies its pre-programmed mission in about 7 or 8 minutes. It's done spraying, comes back, and then you fill it up again. So every 10 minutes, you're going out and doing like a whole new flight cycle. So 5, 6 flights per hour. Between every flight right now, you're swapping battery and you're swapping payload. So that's to segue into like another conversation. That in between flight process where the operator's still swapping the payload and the battery, we're trying to automate that. That's where we're going. That's where the industry is going to just make that fully autonomous. So the drones, when flying, of course, are autonomous. Now we got to automate the process in between flights, and then you can take the human almost completely out of the equation. That's the future of the industry.
That's interesting. I see some parallels again to the 3D printing industry. There's so much focus on the printers themselves, and there still is. But now we're starting to see the industry focus on like, okay, that's great. We can 3D print the parts, but what are we going to do with them afterwards, and how are we going to post-produce them?
Sure.
And there's a lot more emphasis on that. And I think that's good. I think that shows maturity as these industries are continuing to develop. So very cool. So kind of shifting gears again on, again, I'm so tempted to go on the technical stuff. So I'm fascinated by it. But
I mean, you could dive in there if you want.
what about on the business side though? Because there's still a lot to unpack there as well. So first thing that comes to mind is regulations. So that's obviously, having to do with the FAA. What about even environmental conditions and even, I'll just kind of go straight to what about political things that are going on both abroad, at home? Are those considered challenges or are they opportunities?
Both. So, right now we talked about this a little bit off air, but there is a potential ban, I should say, going through Congress. So a representative out of New York named Elise Stefanik, Republican in New York, put a bill into the National Defense Authorization Act. So that's the giant bill that passes, like the giant defense spending bill that passes every year. It has to be updated by Congress. So they stuck this little section in there, which basically said that DJI, the largest drone manufacturer in the world, Chinese-based, based out of Shenzhen, China, she said that they need to be considered a covered entity in the eyes of the United States, which means effectively that they're someone to watch out for. In layman's terms, like they're a possible national security threat. And so what would happen if this bill passes is that because they're a covered entity, they would not be able to get FCC authorization to be on our networks for communication. So like the RC controller wouldn't work, their software wouldn't work. So effectively they would be paperweights. Virtually their products are banned for use by anyone here in this country if this passes. So it's interesting. This isn't new. These concerns about Chinese-made drones aren't new. Actually, as early as 2017, these drones started being banned or prohibited by use by the U.S. government themselves. So it's now evolved 7 years later to the point where they might just be outright banned for anybody here in the States, public, private sector, whatever. There's arguments on both sides to be made. Personally, I'm staying as neutral about it as possible. Of course, it'd be foolish for me to say it wouldn't somehow benefit Hylio if one of our largest competitors was prohibited from operating there. There would be for sure like an influx of people coming to Hylio as like one of the remaining options. That's true. But on the other side, I guess wish or hope that regulators here in the US would find common ground with companies, because I don't want them to arbitrarily just decide one day it's DJI, it's DJI today, but like tomorrow could be Hylio for just some arbitrary reason. So I want there to be more communication saying, hey, sit them down. Like, this is what you're doing wrong that we don't like, that we're afraid of, that we want to come to terms on. If you can do this, and this right, then you can play in our market. And give them a chance to do it. And if they can't do it, then okay, say sayonara. But that's a big thing that's happening right now in the industry. There's, as you might imagine, a lot of people up in arms about it, because a lot of people, American companies, use DJI products for filming, for even disaster response, so fire departments, police departments. And so there's concerns there. They're saying, if these things get banned, how can we do our day-to-day functions? Some of them they consider very critical. And then, of course, the other argument is, well, there's companies like Hylio, there's other U.S.-made manufacturers, there's other Western allied, so like French companies, Australian companies that could fill the gap. Then it's like, okay, like, can they fill it to the extent that we need them to? DJI makes so many drones, they've got the industrial base to do it. Can we meet the demand? We as in like the Western manufacturers? And the answer is yes, but it will take some time. That's probably the biggest thing going on politically with drones right now.
So the other side is, of course, there's a conflict in Ukraine. We're seeing a lot of videos surfacing on the internet where drones are being used in military applications. I mean, again, this might be a touchy subject, but what are your thoughts on that and just how it might affect your industry?
I think it's happening. Like we don't do defense work right now as a company. I'm not saying strictly that we're against it. It's hard work to do. I'll say that much because just of the legal barrier to even work with the U.S. government.
Mhm.
There are extremely long lead times for these contracts to close, and there's prime contractors and subprime contractors, and like there's a lot of rigmarole that you have to do. So right now, as a company, from a business perspective, we don't think that's a good fit because there's a lot of overhead. You have to have like an army of lawyers, compliance people. You have to have certain certifications. It's just a whole different ballgame, right? So that's not a fast enough return on our investment. That's not really how our company is structured commercially.
Mhm.
So we don't do that. On the other hand, like it's the engineering side of me is like very impressed with what we've seen some people be able to do, just like on the fly in the garage in Ukraine or wherever it is, just these little hacks that they do to turn these relatively simple and cheap drones into effective weapons, right? For offense, defense, whatever it is. My engineering brain's like, okay, that's cool. But I do think there's serious concerns. Like it's nothing new, but like we need to talk about where do you draw the line? So you draw the line. Do we want machines on the battlefield making decisions themselves to take out a human life?
Yeah.
It's a big question. I don't have an answer. I think it's inevitable that you have weapons of war evolving, and of course, drones are already there. We're not going to get rid of that, but we do need to be cognizant of like where the end game could be. And maybe it's impractical, but I do think there has to be a line drawn somewhere. But I'm no geopolitical strategist or lawmaker, so I have no idea how that would work.
It's definitely thought provoking. I mean, that and AI and how that could correlate into the hardware and this type of situation. So, I guess to bring it back home a little bit, you've kind of alluded to some of the new products you're working on. What is the thing that you're looking forward to most over the next 2 or 3 years that might be something to look forward to?
We've got a project where we're making a hybrid powered drone. So much like a hybrid vehicle, it's got a internal combustion engine and it's got a lithium polymer battery, and it's running that. It's like a true hybrid system, meaning that you could pull from both sources at the same time. But anyway, it's an exciting project because right now drones are limited in terms of flight endurance. Even with the best battery technology, you can only fly with a full payload on a drone for maybe 20 minutes tops.
Mhm.
So with the hybrid system, you can push that out to an hour, maybe an hour and a half with a very sizable payload. So it would just unlock a lot of capabilities in our market directly, but it would even allow Hylio to get into other markets like long range heavy machinery delivery. So it's funny. This is like a bit of a tangent. There's like I talked to a Korean person the other day from Korea, and we were talking about drones. We were talking about the new hybrid, and he was like, "You wouldn't believe how much we would love that because every single day they've got soldiers, Korean soldiers that go from the bottom of these mountains up to the top to the watch post because they've got the DMZ, right? And every day these soldiers have to carry up water, food in these big knapsacks, and it's whatever 2 miles up a mountain. It's horrible, right? It's like a lot of work. They would just buy like a hybrid drone that could carry this payload out a jet. And so there's huge demand for a product like a heavy lift drone with like good endurance like that you don't even realize. But the second you build it, it's like if you build it, they will come, like Kevin Costner Field of Dreams thing.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those products where yes, we recognize there's already like a core market in our own sector that this is going to help out with. But I'm excited to see just when we put it out there, how many other people are going to pile in and be like, hey, I can use it for A, B, C, whatever. So that excites me. It's a fun project from an engineering perspective because it's anything involving an engine is just badass, right?
No doubt.
Sticking an engine on like a flying machine is just really cool, but also really challenging. So it introduces a lot of complications mechanically, a lot of vibrations, heat issues. So you got to make sure you're venting exhaust in the right place and you're getting clean air into the thing. And there's a lot of stuff we haven't dealt with yet, just traditionally doing pure electric machines that we're now learning and dealing with for this project. So it's really fun, really challenging in a good way.
Awesome. So we've been 3D printing together for quite a while. I think what's interesting about you and I working together is we started working with FDM, and I remember even doing some acetone vapor treating to try to increase the strength and stuff like that.
Yes.
What I think is cool about your case study is the fact that you've kind of adopted pretty much every material and technology that we've had along the way. Now, you do a lot of powder bed fusion with us and those types of technologies, multi-jet fusion in particular. Where do you see 3D printing giving you a strategic advantage on your product?
So we already talked about the prototyping. As you know, we haven't really talked about it much in this podcast, but we do a ton of like prototyping, even to this day. So that's the DNA of the company, is just to like build drones as fast as possible, crash them, improve them. So I started doing that years ago when we started the company, but right now we have a whole team of engineers, and basically it's almost like their job is just to break drones, because they just like gotta put them up, see how fast they can go, see how responsive you can get the radars to be optical coordinates, etc. But they crash and you got to rebuild them. So the 3D printing is going to continue to be really important just for that prototyping phase. But as you know, we also have a lot of your components in the final product, in the production product.
Mhm.
And simply put, there's just stuff that in our industry, we're selling aircraft. So you're not selling hundreds of thousands of units. This isn't like a little widget. Right now, at the volumes that the industry's at, like where our company's at, a lot of companies, you're only selling hundreds of a certain component, right? And that's still like servicing the market really well. And that's like really good revenue for aircraft like this.
Mhm.
And so that doesn't lend itself to injection molding. So a lot of your 3D printed parts, which you guys finish really well, and they almost have injection molding quality at the very end of everything. Like they're perfect for the scale we're at, and it's going to be like that really for the foreseeable future. Like the molding is kind of out of the question for a lot of these products. Like I said, we're just not at the units to justify it.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't have said that any better. And I didn't mean for it to sound like a plug, but it's true. We always say that one, we don't compete with injection molding because we're looking at the market where we look for a specific volume. You know, it might be one product or one part up to 500 or 1,000. But that's exactly where we operate, and why we like doing what we're doing, because we're working with young, very fast, quick growing companies, and we can kind of see that evolution. Very cool. So, I mean, again, I'm so tempted to keep going. I think we could maybe turn this into an episode 3 or something later on. But
Sure, yeah.
maybe to kind of conclude for right now, what is one piece of advice for young aspiring entrepreneurs that are hearing your story, how you got started so early on, had a very successful career so far with building this company? What is one thing that you would tell people that might be starting a new entrepreneurial journey?
Good question. I've answered it a few times different ways. I think what I'm feeling right now is the importance of getting to the customer as soon as possible. I would say, so I work with a lot of engineers, and I myself have an engineering background. Again, I'm not a great engineer myself, but I know how they think. And a lot of engineers who become entrepreneurs really just want to make the coolest thing. And they don't really think about whether or not the market actually wants or needs that thing. And so I'm always urging young entrepreneurs, especially going to an engineering field or engineering product, to go talk to customers first, prospective customers, hear what they want, like the end result to be, the end functionality of the product, build around that. Don't start from your mind, which is going to obviously think of the most over-engineered, crazy, badass thing.
Yeah.
Start from their feedback and you can go that way. So more of like a bottom-up approach, right? I think we have inefficiently done some things, especially early in the company's history, and myself, where we designed something because, again, we thought it was cool or we thought that people would like it, and then it just totally fell flat or no one gave a crap about it. So,
Yeah.
I would just avoid over-engineering things, and you do that by talking to the actual end users themselves first.
Again, another great word. I couldn't agree more. I think to bring in some Six Sigma terminology, the voice of the customer is always so important, and a lot of people get so enthralled by the technology it can be blinding. So that's great.
It's a great feeling to just like conceptualize something really, really cool that's like the latest, like the cutting edge in an industry. But yeah, commercial viability, like you hear so many times that a company or a product was before its time.
Right.
Yeah, you want to avoid that. That's ultimately it's not worth it to be before your time.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to continuing working together.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, we'll do this again.
Thanks.
Yeah.